Hello and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host Mitchell J. Rabin, and I'm very glad you're joining us again today. Today we're going to have another very interesting show. We have a cosmologist with us, who's also a scientist, a international businesswoman, and a woman who is of great renown, who's done extraordinary work and writing. And her last piece of literature is this: The Cosmic Hologram, Information at the Center of Creation, Jude. She's here from England for a brief period in New York City, and we were lucky enough to bring her into the studio to discuss this really pivotal piece of work, which has the potential of changing our entire worldview as science and spirit, you could say, come together, forming this confluence that was once in place and is now coming back again. Glad you're here to meet our audience here in New York and elsewhere.
Indeed.
You know, your work is formidable, as I was saying, and it really kind of comes together, bringing elements that have been somewhat disparate. I say that there was a divorce that was organized by the Catholic Church. Sounds ironic, doesn't it? Many years ago, and they orchestrated, for various reasons, a divorce between science and spirituality. Mm-hmm. And I feel that now we're back, time for a remarriage.
I agree. I think it's time to take our vows again. Come back into the sacred marriage again. But I think this time's very pivotal as well, because for the first time, science has gone its own track, spirituality or religion has gone its own track. But science has always tried to be, the whole basis of science is objective, experimental, discovery, etc. But what that's done is the scientist separates himself or herself from what's being investigated. But we've known for over 100 years through quantum mechanics, there is no separation. So it's a hiding to nowhere to keep trying to be separate from something you're not actually separate from. But I think the key now...
It's a conundrum.
It's a conundrum. It's a paradox. But it's a conundrum that's finding its way now, I think, through to some form of resolution.
Yes.
Because I think, 100 years ago, the 20th century scientific revolution came about because people were trying to figure out hot ovens. Hot ovens. And realising...
That's interesting.
Well, it is. It's so basic, isn't it? And yet they thought that that heat had infinite wavelengths, because that's what the theory was saying. But of course that's a nonsense.
So they tried to get reality to conform with the theory.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's, you could say, one of the bases of most science.
It should be. It should be following the evidence wherever that evidence leads.
Not the theory.
Exactly.
The theory was to follow.
It was to follow
the evidence, so i.e. reality.
Exactly. And they dance often together.
Yes.
But that was getting out of kilter. Of course, you may know the story in the late 1800s. There was a chancellor of a university that was telling youngsters not to study physics because everything's been discovered. Oh, ouch.
Oh,
and then
fantastic.
Came along, within a decade, came along relativity and quantum theory.
Yeah.
And the thing is, all the deeper clues that they offered us to the deeper nature of reality were pushed to the side. And science went on its sort of ongoing mainstream way of objectivity and separation and forget consciousness and.
Exactly.
To a point we're at now where,
it's come full circle.
It's come full circle. And the evidence across so many fields of research and all scales of existence are, converging to what is now on the threshold of 21st century.
Exactly.
Scientific
To
revolution.
wit. But
That's British, to wit.
I told you, I don't have control over that or my sense of humor. In fact, on that note, there's a more modern version of the story you just told, Jude, from a Jewish New Yorker comedian, Woody Allen, who in his Annie Hall tells a story of him being about 7 or 8 years old, a little precocious kid who stopped doing his homework. And his mother took him to the family physician and said, please help me have the child go back to doing his homework. And when the doctor turned to him, he said, Alvy, now why is it that you stopped doing your homework? He said, because the universe is expanding.
Oh, he got it.
So right.
He got it at 7 years old.
Isn't that the basis for no more homework,
No more
right?
homework. Sorry, done.
But anyway, anyway, I thought you would appreciate that.
I do.
The cosmic hologram, it's a brilliant name. Could you deconstruct it?
I will try.
Okay.
I probably.
What do you want us to know
Okay.
about the essence of your work?
The essence of my work, really, and it's been a 60-year-old journey when I started as having multidimensional experiences at 4 years old. So that's been a lifelong experiential exploration and investigation
Being
of
the
the
Pisces
nature.
that you are.
Oh, yes. But I have Sagittarius moon, so that's a lot to do
yes.
with it as well.
Got it.
But also then bringing science in, because science is a great discipline. You know, it's very easy when we explore and experience.
Sure.
We can go into imaginative realms and it's beautiful. But for me, it felt very important that we meld all of that deep Gnostic experiential understanding with science, which at its best is a very powerful tool to understand the nature of reality, if and only if it truly follows where the evidence leads. So that's been my lifelong journey. But what the cosmic hologram is about is literally reconciling science with spirituality. But at a time we've sort of touched it, we've sort of had a sense of it. Quantum physics gave us a lot of clues, as did relativity. But each of them self wasn't sufficient, and we now are beginning to understand why. Leading edge science is understanding that information, the same digitized information that pervades all our technologies, is exactly the same as digitized information, bits of information, which essentially don't just underpin and pervade what we call reality, but is the most fundamental stuff of reality, more fundamental than energy and matter, which of course is quantum physics, more primary than space-time, which
theory
is
of
called
relativity.
relativity. Right. So the beauty of this is when we start to restate the laws of physics as algorithms of information, enabling our universe to exist and evolve, and taking from 2 laws of thermodynamics to 2 laws of information, voila, on the way we actually can restate quantum physics and relativity theory as complementary expressions of information. The holographic bit comes in because cosmologies are also realizing that the best way for our universe to be able to evolve, as you said, as Woody said all those years ago, is for what we call reality essentially being a projection, if you want to call it that,
Of consciousness.
of consciousness from a holographic boundary of what we call space-time. So in that sense, from the beginning of our universe, 13.8 billion years ago, not as a big bang, but as a big breath, exquisitely ordered.
I remember it well.
Oh, you do? You were there at the time.
Well, yeah.
Well, we both were, yeah.
I recognized you right away.
Absolutely. So it's been this amazing journey.
Yeah.
But as a result, the way that reality is constructed by consciousness means that time flows as the accumulation of information and space expands because, you know, just as a balloon, as it grows, if you have the same tiny little pixelation on its surface, the greater the surface, the greater numbers of pixels, the more information. And so it explains by restating reality as informed, not random data, but patterned, intentional information.
Inform.
Yeah. On every scale we're discovering this, on every level, on every realm, you know, on every field of research, this is coming through. So the cosmic hologram is our universe existing and evolving as innately informed, holographically realized, unified entity. Because in unification, this explains why, on the one hand, you know, things like telepathy, remote viewing, precognition, are all part of the deal.
One mind,
One
so
mind.
to speak.
Literally,
Sure.
universe soul.
Yes,
Of which
indeed.
we're microcosmic co-creators.
Exactly. But you know, I got to tell you, I used to pray to UFOs when I was 14 to come and get me because...
I did too. Did you? It was too hard.
Please.
It was too hard.
I wanted an escape hatch. And also, I came from the place that, you know, the universe was teeming with intelligence.
Absolutely.
And I didn't find a whole lot on Earth, frankly.
Less
and
than
so,
you'd hope for.
there's still
Or at
hope.
least not the non-human stuff. Marvelous. The
Yeah.
human stuff, maybe.
But I'll tell you, Jude, I was putting this kind of thinking together then.
Yeah.
Honestly, as a 14-year-old, just because I feel like it's indigenous wisdom that's literally in our bones and our DNA.
Absolutely.
And given the opportunity to emerge, it does.
Absolutely.
Now, I know that this might have some difficulty being quantified, what I'm saying, although I fully appreciate the quantum field. No, the quantitative analysis.
Or the
and the
informational
science.
field. The
Right.
informational field.
And in fact, I would love to, you know, I'm teeming, by the way, with questions for you while you're speaking and laying this out, as I have been since reading some of the book. And I was sort of raised with this idea of inform at ion.
Okay.
Now, I would say that an ion is a much larger digit
Much bigger.
than
Much, much bigger.
the bits that we're talking about, the bits and
Absolutely.
bytes.
Sure.
But still in all, it was an interesting way of bringing the importance of information
Sure.
down to at least an ionic level,
Exactly that.
embedded in the word itself.
That's right. That's right. And you're right. I mean, the thing is, as an innately informed and holographically realized universe, the information plays out at every scale. I mean, you talked
Every
about,
scale, right.
you know, ions, but the basic, the fundamental pixel scale
Yes.
is what's called the Planck scale.
Yes.
And the Planck scale literally naturally falls out when the principles of physics, the laws of physics are put together. And in space terms, it's 10 to the minus 35 meters. Now, if you think of the scale of that, that's as tiny as the scale to an atom or even a proton, as a proton is to the scale of the universe. And in time terms, it's 10 to the minus 44 seconds, which, considering our universe is only 10 to the 17 seconds since the Big Breath, is minute. But what it means is this vast amount of information as our universe, space expands, time flows, has such incredible potential for complexity and self-awareness on so many different levels of existence. And you know, as a very sensitive kid and as a very intuitive person, and as many folks have experienced, they get this at an aha, deep level.
Yeah.
The book's written for everyone, but primarily it's written for those who haven't had those experiences and perhaps closed down the possibility of having those experiences because science and school and peers say, look,
Sure.
science says, you know, nothing's meaningful, everything's random, physical world's all there is, this chair's solid, we're separate. We know quantum physics and relativity showed the way. What this does is arrive as at a destination of that journey.
It's almost like you've taken linear reality in the name of science, laid it out to come finally to a non-linear reality.
Exactly, and
So,
literally resolve them.
a spherical reality, which, by the way, brings something else up.
Yeah.
This idea, and please, inform me. This idea of the universe being finite was, I tripped upon a couple of little gems in here, and that was one of them.
Yeah.
Interesting. I've always been thinking that the universe is absolutely infinite. So
How does that play?
this is the question. I'm wondering if the universe, as you're casting it, as a time-space continuum, is within the context of what I feel you were using the word multiverse to describe, which is an infinite matter. Oh boy, issue, subject.
Completely.
All right.
Completely.
Please,
I mean,
tell
the
me.
book completes very much with that.
Okay.
Because what this...
So this is finite, but that's infinite.
Absolutely. So everything that I'm saying is, and it's not me, and it's not my evidence or my
Right.
evidence. I'm
You've
showing the
accrued.
evidence from cosmology, and what cosmology is showing is a number of things which powerfully suggests that our universe of itself is finite, with a beginning 13.8 billion years ago, ever expanding, a life story, and an end point of releasing perhaps its accumulated perspective back to the cosmic plenum. But the evidence for this is a number of things. First of all, our universe began in a finite way. There's nothing in our universe that is not finite. If you really follow the piece, there's nothing in our universe that is not within space-time that is not finite. The relic electromagnetism, the fields from the beginning of the Big Breath, called the cosmic microwave background. It goes back to goes back to hot ovens 100 years ago. The reason quantum theory showed that all energy matter is quantized and not infinite is because there were not infinite wavelengths coming out of a hot oven. Now that's the same with the cosmic microwave
This is interesting. Yeah.
background.
No, I'm with you.
There's cut-offs in wavelengths. If our universe was infinite, there would not be a cut-off. There is. The other biggie...
The point is that there are boundaries.
There are boundaries.
Yeah.
There are boundaries.
Within which certain operations can take place and laws be applied.
Exactly.
And out of which, well, dark matter, dark energy, what have you.
But even that, I think the dark energy, dark matter will find within pretty much 20th century science. 21st century science of an informed and holographic universe. And, of course, crucially, that reality isn't duality-based, it's unity-based, it's unified, is the key, because it isn't just a scientific revolution, it's a revolution in consciousness.
Absolutely.
But there's so much also evidence of our universe being finite, but as you say, within an infinite plenum, an eternal plenum, which Einstein called cosmic mind.
Yes.
So more like a finite thought form, and many finite thought forms, which can be utterly different from our universe. Ours is wonderful because we're here eating chocolate cake and chatting, but I like big size, small size bubbles that last a long time, bubbles that last a moment, but all bubbles within an infinite cosmic mind.
I have another context through which to look at what you're saying, which is in alignment with the Indra's breath.
Indra's neck.
Which simply is the idea in the Upanishads and all the Vedic teachings of the conditional world. That's the time-space continuum and warp field. And the unconditional, which I'm just positing, that would be sort of beyond that equivalent to the multiverse.
Well, I think the thing with the multiverse, and there are many versions of this, and one of the reasons why physicists came up with the concept of a multiverse to begin with was to avoid talking about consciousness. Because our universe is so perfectly posited, set up, the laws of physics, everything set up to enable the existence and the evolution of ever more higher levels of complexity and self-awareness. Now, if you're starting to understand that, then you cannot not bring in consciousness. But physicists did not want to have that discussion. So when our universe was discovered to be set up in such an amazingly, exquisitely ordered and fine-tuned way, the knee-jerk reaction was, well, there must be the equivalent number of other universes, and ours is just a random outpouring of
And the whole idea of parallel universes and all of that, what was I reading recently? It was just
it's nonsense.
Completely
nonsense. And, it really...
Actually, you make that point here.
Yeah, but it's not just me making that
No,
point.
no. It's a whole physicist's story of... It's very much like a wrong rabbit hole.
It's a wrong rabbit hole. Yeah. It's basically anything to avoid having any sense of or discussion or exploration of the nature of consciousness.
Jude, when it was recognized that the observer is in the experiment, is in the observed, and it changed the behavior from particle behavior to wave behavior as one example of many.
Absolutely.
That should have sort of ended that discussion.
It should have, but it didn't.
And opened up another.
It opened up another.
Grander
And
one.
I think for the last 80 years, mainstream science has really tried to avoid what is now unavoidable, just as a lot of 19th century scientists were trying to avoid the implications and the discoveries of quantum theory and relativity theory. For the first 2 years after Einstein came forward with general relativity theory, he was insulted, he was degraded, it was appalling, until there was a discovery and an experimental validation of it. And, you know, there are predictions coming out of this that are measurable and that are experimentally verifiable.
Such as?
This suggests, and I'm going on from this because I wanted to see if scientists would get it before I needed to say this.
Yeah.
But this posits that space has to accelerate. In other words, the expansion of space can't just be at the same
Accelerate
speed.
or expand?
Expand, yes, that's fine, but it has to accelerate or decelerate its expansion. And that's all to do with gravity and the equivalence of gravity and acceleration, and the fact that both are informationally entropic. In other words, the past has less information than the present, which has less information than the future. So when you look at gravity in those terms, not trying to get quantum gravity, because that's never going to happen, because that's not the way it works. And now when you look at it informationally, you understand why that doesn't work. But when you look at it informationally, you also understand that space, yes, must expand, but it must accelerate in its expansion, or decelerate, but not at the same velocity. And cosmology has shown that our universe has always been either accelerating, decelerating, and now accelerating again.
So is it always cyclical?
That's not saying that's cyclical. It's part of a process that actually goes from the beginning of space-time in a universe soul's cycle, a life story, a lifetime. Yes. But it's not cyclical in the sense it goes back. It's just,
right.
Yeah. So
right.
So you can have acceleration, then deceleration, then acceleration again. But all the time, space is expanding. And that
what are then the implications for us? And when somebody has a so-called unified field experience, so to speak, which I had as a youngster, and I know you have too, and it changes your entire worldview.
Yes, it does.
So when one integrates, and like in a kind of a gestaltic moment, gets what you're saying here, how does that then change our daily living?
This is crucial, because I didn't write the book for scientists. I wrote the book for everybody at the scale of our everyday lives.
Yeah.
Because what this is showing, and I put out the evidence across all scales of existence and all fields, are showing that the same informational patterns that underpin the so-called natural world underpin all human behaviours. So for example, the internet, all the nodes, all the structures, the dynamic evolution of the internet embodies exactly the same fractal patterns as does ecosystems. Yeah? Cities grow in the same way as galaxies form. The incidence and the destructive power of human conflicts, when plotted in terms of that relationship between frequency and human fatalities, is exactly the same relationships that underpin earthquakes in terms of their frequency and destructive power. We're finding that there's absolutely no difference between human patterned behaviours and the natural world.
Exactly. Very interesting. However, being the seat of consciousness that we are, and as you make the very good point, we are consciousness. We don't have it. If anything, it has us.
Right. And the whole world.
The whole world.
Absolutely.
Right. The entire universe is conscious on a certain level.
Yes.
With that said, within consciousness is also will,
Of course.
preference,
Yes.
willingness.
Yes.
With that said,
Yes.
can we exercise our consciousness to shift those seeming impending probabilities of human conflict, war,
absolutely.
even hurricanes and all?
Yes, because we are microcosmic
Right.
co-creators
And
of our
fractal
realities.
relationship.
Absolutely. And there are principles that derive from, if you like, physics, but also derive from an understanding of consciousness in the way it plays out. And of course, it's the same. So yes, we can. We're on the verge of understanding this. The book, I hope, is a seed point for us to understand, experience and embody the unity awareness of unified reality. And so as you know, one of the early endorsers of the book said, it could be the difference between humanity being a viable species on this planet.
And
Because if we don't get this, if we don't come together, if we don't realise that we ultimately are all one, and yet we are unique, and we are microcosmic co-creators, unless we can do that,
yes,
then, you know, our global emergency cannot then shift into the emergence of our conscious evolution. And yet if we can get it, I believe...
another big out breath.
breath.
This time also a sigh of relief. You know, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Those of us who have been connected to different wisdom traditions, East and West and
Indeed.
in between, have been saying this without the scientific underpinning necessarily for a long time. And sort of we have to get
exactly
the
right.
unified field reality of existence in order to survive.
Absolutely, but science has such a sway in terms of our, you know, comfort blanket of this is the nature of reality.
Exactly.
So until science, which it is now, coming to the same perspective, we haven't yet until now had the evidence, the scientifically based evidence. And that's why I would have loved an easy time to write this book without the scientific evidence, but that's not what was coming through.
No.
Now we've got the evidence.
Exactly.
We have that validation. We've got that verification. You know,
Well,
we can,
in the religion of the day,
exactly.
which is science,
Yeah.
which, you know,
but
is
reconciles with all of those ancient perspectives.
Of course it
But
does.
just brings that, if you like, legitimacy to the deeper, authentic experience of
You know,
this.
it would be funny, Jude, and we're out of time, I see. However, if it were actually inverted, science was being legitimized by the ancient
experience.
story
And,
of
you know,
the indigenous wisdom.
And in a way it is.
Kind of funny, right?
It probably won't ever admit to it, but it is.
It is.
It is.
Well, listen, my dear, it has been so wonderful. Thank you for your good work.
Bless you,
It's
Mitchell.
really
Thank you. And thanks
boding
everybody.
well for the future.
Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for watching us.
Jude Curavan, the cosmic hologram cosmologist at large, who's helping bring us around to a deep, essentially indigenous and spiritual cosmic understanding of the nature of the universe, the nature of reality, and what we can do once we are infused with that kind of knowingness. So thanks so much for joining us. Visit me at www.abetterworld.tv and write to me at mjr@abetterworld.net. I love hearing from you, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.